The dust came up the road first, then the rider, and Della Pruitt set the milk pail down in the grass and reached for the rifle she kept leaning against the porch rail the way other women kept a broom there. She did not run. She had stopped running from things a long time ago, somewhere back across 2 states, and a childhood she rarely spoke of. She raised the rifle, settled the stock against her shoulder, and let the barrel find the man coming toward her through the heat shimmer. Her hands were steady. They were always steady. They had pulled a breech calf in the dark, had splinted a foal's cannon bone, had sunk every fence post on the western line by herself with a maul that weighed near half what she did. Whoever this stranger was, riding up the Cardwell Road like he had business here, he was going to learn the same thing the bank had learned, and the Cattlemen's Association had learned, and Royce Mallory had learned 3 separate times. This place was not for the taking. If this story already has hold of you, go on and follow this channel. Stay with it clear to the last word, and leave the name of your town down in the comments. Della's story traveled a long way to reach that porch, and there is no telling how far it will go from here. The rider drew rein at the edge of the yard, hands lifting slow and easy off the saddle horn, palms open. He was lean and sun-cured, a faded army coat across his shoulders, though there were no stripes left on it, and a face that had been handsome before 2 hard years sanded it down. "Easy now," he said. "I'd take it kindly if you'd point that elsewhere." "You'd take a lot of things kindly, I expect," Della said. "Folks who ride onto land that isn't theirs usually do. State your business." He looked past her, and she watched his eyes move across the yard, the way a man's eyes move across his own face in a glass after a long sickness, looking for what was missing and finding instead what had been put right. The corral that had been a tangle of gray rotted rails when she first came was squared and sound now, full of horses with shine on their coats. The barn roof no longer sagged. There was a kitchen garden where there had been hardpan, and a string of wash snapping in the wind, and smoke off the chimney, though it was August, because she'd been rendering tallow that morning. His jaw worked once. "This is the Cardwell place," he said quietly. "It is. My name is Jonah Cardwell. Amos Cardwell was my father." His voice caught a little on the past tense, and she understood then that he did not know, that he had been somewhere far enough that the word had not reached him. "I've been gone 2 years. I've come home." Della lowered the rifle. Not all the way, but she lowered it. The summer of 1887 had come down on the Bitterroot country like a judgment. The grass cured to brittle gold by June, the creeks pulled back into their stones, and along the valley, the smaller outfits folded one after another, their owners selling out for whatever the big men would pay, which was never much. The town of Coldwater Forks, Montana Territory, sat in the throat of the valley, where the stage road crossed 2 Medicine Creek, and that summer it had the held-breath quiet of a place waiting to find out who it belonged to. Jonah Cardwell had left it 2 springs before, with a string of remounts to sell to the army post up north, and a head full of plans to come back flush enough to clear the note his father had carried for a decade. He'd gotten as far as the post and no farther in any way that mattered. A fever in a freight town laid him up through the winter. The man who held his contract died, and the contract died with him, and untangling it, ate another season. He had sent money home twice, every dollar he could spare, and gotten no letters back, and told himself the silence meant nothing. He had not let himself imagine what it might mean. What it meant was that Amos Cardwell had been dead 14 months, taken by the same fever that nearly took his son, and that the ranch should by every reasonable accounting have gone to the bank, and then to Royce Mallory, who had been circling it like weather for years. That it had not was on account of a woman Jonah Cardwell had never met, who had walked into Coldwater Forks the autumn before last, with everything she owned in a flour sack, and away with horses that nobody had bothered to look for, because they could not get past the size and the plain, hard face of her. Della Pruitt had been turned away from every door in that valley before she ever reached the Cardwell gate. She was 24, broad and heavy and homely, with a voice that did not soften itself for anyone, and the men who did the hiring had laughed in her face or simply shut the door. She had slept 3 nights in the livery hayloft on charity she paid back by mucking stalls, and on the 4th morning Amos Cardwell, half blind with grief over a wife 2 years gone and watching his own land die around him, he had hired her because he was too tired to argue, and she would work for £1 and a corner of the bunkhouse. By the time he died, she had become the only thing holding the place together. She had gentled 19 half-wild horses that first winter, the kind no other hand in the valley would put a saddle to, and the cavalry remount board had bought 14 of them in the spring at a price that made the buyer go quiet and recount. She had kept the ledgers in a tight hand, every dollar in and out, because Amos could no longer see the figures and would not trust them to anyone who could. She had nursed him at the end and buried him under the cottonwood beside his wife, and read the deed and the note and the law over and over by lamplight until she understood exactly how thin the ground was beneath her feet. The note was held by the Coldwater Forks Bank, and the bank was run by a soft-handed man named Edmund Pyle. And Edmund Pyle did what Royce Mallory told him to do. Mallory was the largest stockman in the valley and meant to be the only one. He had been buying up the failing outfits for cents, and he wanted the Cardwell place worse than any of them, because the railroad survey had come through the spring before, and the proposed spur line ran straight across its southern quarter, along 2 Medicine Creek. Whoever held that ground when the rails came would name his own price for the right-of-way. Mallory had run the numbers. They were the kind of numbers a man kills for, or near enough. He had assumed the place would fall to him like a ripe apple when the old man died. He had not counted on Della. She had carried Amos's last note payment into the bank herself, in coin, 3 days after the funeral, and laid it on Edmund Pyle's desk before he could finish telling her the property would be reverting. She had a receipt for it within the hour, and she kept that receipt, and every one that came after, in a tin box buried where no fire and no man would find it. All of this, Jonah Cardwell learned in pieces over the first long evening, sitting at his own kitchen table, while the strange, capable woman who had saved his birthright fried side meat and would not look at him for too long at a stretch. He learned it, and something in his chest that had been clenched for 2 years slowly came unfisted. He had ridden home expecting a padlock and a grave. He had found the grave, but he had also found the rest of it standing, squared, alive, and a woman across the table from him who had done it with her 2 hands and asked nobody's leave. "I'll be square with you," she said when the food was down and the coffee poured. "This is your land. Your name's on the deed under your father's. I knew that when I stayed. I could have let it go. Sold off the stock, taken my share, ridden on before the bank moved." She turned her cup a quarter turn on the wood. "I didn't want to. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. This is the first place in my life I ever wanted to stay." "Then stay," Jonah said. She looked at him for a long moment, weighing the word the way she weighed a horse she didn't yet trust. "Easy to say tonight," she said. "We'll see what you say when Royce Mallory comes calling, because he will." He came calling on a Thursday. The weeks before that had been good ones, though neither of them would have said so aloud. Jonah Cardwell was no stranger to work, and once the shock of his father wore off him, he threw himself into it beside her, and found to his quiet astonishment that she let him. She didn't coddle, and she didn't defer. When he set a gatepost crooked, she told him so. When he doubted a mare was sound, she put the lead in his hand and made him feel down the leg himself until he found what she'd already found. In the evenings, she taught him the ledger, the long columns of it, every figure tied to a thing he could walk out and touch. He had never in his life seen a mind work the way hers worked, holding the whole place in it at once, every animal and acre and dollar, and never once dropping a thread. He stopped seeing the size of her and the plainness of her, somewhere in the second week, and could never afterward say exactly when. He only knew that one morning she laughed a real laugh, surprised out of her by a foal that sat down in the trough, and he thought it was the finest sound he had heard in 2 years, and the thought did not startle him at all. Then Mallory's buggy came up the road with 2 riders behind it. He was a heavy, handsome man, going gray at the temples, with the easy warmth of a man who had never in his life been told no and made to mean it. He climbed down, looked around the yard with frank appraisal, and smiled at Jonah like an old friend. "Jonah Cardwell, by God, we heard you were dead." He put out his hand. Jonah did not take it. Mallory let it fall without losing the smile. "Your father was a good man, a friend of mine. It grieved me, what happened here." His eyes slid to Della, standing at the corral rail, and the smile thinned at the edges. "Though I see you've had help keeping the lamps lit." "After a fashion." "Say what you came to say," Jonah told him. Mallory said it pleasantly, which made it worse. "The note," he explained, "had a balloon payment coming due at the end of September. Jonah hadn't known. Della had, and it was a sum no small outfit could raise in a drought year. The bank was, regrettably, going to have to call it. Now, Mallory was prepared to be generous. He would buy the place outright, clear the note, and give Jonah enough besides to start fresh somewhere with no hard feelings. It was, he said, a kindness. It was more than the law required. "And the woman?" Jonah said. "What about her? She holds a hand's wage going back 2 years that was never paid, and the breeding stock is half hers by my father's own word, written in the ledger." Mallory's gaze passed over Della, the way a man looks at a fence post he means to pull. "I'm sure something fair could be arranged," he said. "Though I'd be careful, son, about what arrangements you make with a woman like that. People talk. A strange female living out here unmarried, running a man's land. It's not the kind of thing that does a young rancher's name any good." He let that sit. "I say this as a friend of your father's." Della did not move from the rail, but Jonah saw her hand tighten on the wood until the knuckles paled, and he understood that this was the wound the man had aimed for, and that he had aimed for it on purpose, because he had nothing real to swing, and so he swung at the thing she could not change. "You can go now," Jonah said. Mallory went, but at the buggy he turned, and the warmth was gone off him entirely, and what was under it was flat and cold. "End of September," he said. "The bank will have the figure for you by Monday. I'd think hard, the both of you, about what's worth losing over a stretch of dry grass." His eyes found Della one last time. "And about who'll stand with you when it comes to it. Because I can tell you now, no one will." That was where he was wrong, though it took until the stockman's meeting for him to learn it. The September payment was real, and it was crushing, and for 3 days after Pyle handed across the figure, Jonah and Della worked the numbers from every side and could not make them come right. The drought had thinned the calf crop. The remount board's fall-by had been cut. They could sell off the breeding mares Della had spent 2 winters building, the whole future of the place, and still come up short, and be left with a ranch that could not feed itself the following spring. It was a trap with no floor to it, and they both knew Mallory had built it deliberately, season by season, the way a patient man builds anything. It was Della who found the way through, sitting at the table at 2 in the morning with the tin box open and every receipt she had ever saved spread out across the wood like a hand of cards. Mallory's whole game ran through the railroad spur. The right-of-way across the southern quarter was the prize. Everything else was leverage to get it cheap, but the survey was not law yet. The spur required an easement granted by the landholder, and the railroad's land agent, a Mr. Pomeroy, lately come up from Helena, had been quietly trying to settle terms for months. Mallory had been telling the railroad he would soon control the land and could deliver the easement for a song. He had been telling the bank the railroad would soon make the foreclosure worthwhile. He had been telling everyone what they wanted to hear, and the whole structure stood on a single, false stone. The belief, all up and down the valley, that the Cardwell place was already as good as his. If that belief broke, the whole thing came down. The Cattlemen's Association met the second Tuesday of every month in the long room above the Coldwater Forks Mercantile. And that September, the room was full, because word had gone around that Mallory meant to settle the Cardwell question publicly and have done with it. He stood at the head of the table in a good coat, expansive and sure, and laid it all out for the assembled men of the valley. The unpaid note, the failing outfit, the unfortunate situation of a respectable man's son tangled up with an unsuitable woman, the simple, regrettable arithmetic that meant the place must change hands. He spoke of the railroad coming, of progress, of what it would mean for them all, once a steady hand held that ground. He was, by the end, not asking the room's permission. He was informing it of a thing already decided. Then Della Pruitt stood up. She had not been expected to come. Women did not come to those meetings. She came anyway, in her one good dress, and she walked to the head of the long table carrying the ledger and the tin box, and she set them down in front of Royce Mallory, where every man in the room could see, and she opened the ledger to the first page. "Mr. Mallory has told you a great many things this evening," she said. Her voice did not rise, and it did not shake. It only filled the room, level and plain, the way her voice filled a barn. "He's told you the Cardwell note is unpaid. Here is the receipt for every payment made on it since the spring of '86, in coin, signed by Mr. Pyle's own hand." She laid them out one at a time, snapping each down on the wood. He's told you the outfit is failing. Here is the bill of sale for 14 head sold to the Army Remount Board, at top dollar, because they were the soundest horses that Board bought in the territory that year, and I gentled every one. Here is the contract for next spring's delivery, signed and sealed, that says they want 20 more. Down went the contract. He's told you I'm an unsuitable woman running a man's land into the ground. She looked up, and she looked straight at Mallory, and she did not blink. Every line in this book is a day I spent on that land. Every figure in it is true. Every post is sunk. Every roof is sound. Every animal is fat and accounted for, because of work I did with my own 2 hands, while this man sat in his fine house and waited for the place to fall so he could buy it for the cost of a railroad bribe. The room had gone dead still. That's the part he hasn't told you, Della said. Has he mentioned the spur line? Has he told you what the railroad will pay for that right-of-way once the rails come through 2 Medicine Creek? Mr. Pomeroy of the railroad is at the Forks Hotel tonight. I sent him a letter 4 days ago. You can ask him yourself whether Royce Mallory ever held the easement he's been selling you. He doesn't. He never did. He's been trading on land he doesn't own to a railroad that's about to learn it. She set the ledger flat and laid her broad hand on top of it. So I'll ask the question Mr. Mallory came here to answer for you. Whose land is this? For a long moment, no one in the long room moved at all. Then Otto Dietrich got to his feet at the second table. He was a German with 80 acres of his own that Mallory had been pressing him to sell, and he stood and folded his arms and said nothing, only stood, and his wife Greta stood up beside him. Then Ruth Calloway stood, whose husband Della had sat up 2 nights with, through a winter pneumonia, doctoring him with the same hands she used on horses, asking nothing for it. Then, the widow Esther Boone, whose hay Della had brought in for free the summer, her boys were too small to swing a scythe. Then a rancher Della had never spoken 3 words to, and then another, and another. Men rising up and down the long room, one after another, the way fence posts go up along a line. Slow, deliberate, and then all of it standing, until there was hardly a man in that room left in his chair, except Edmund Pyle, who had gone the color of tallow, and Royce Mallory, who stood alone at the head of the table he had thought was his. That's your answer, Della said. Mallory left Coldwater Forks within the month. Mr. Pomeroy of the railroad, it turned out, did not care for men who sold him things they did not own, and the spur was resurveyed to run a half-mile north, across ground the Dietrichs and 2 other families held in common, and they granted the easement together and split the railroad's money among them, and not one of them forgot whose ledger had brought it about. The Coldwater Forks Bank found it could be reasonable about the September note, after all. Once it became clear which way the valley had turned, and a renegotiated payment schedule was drawn up that the ranch could meet from the remount contract alone. Edmund Pyle was a careful man, and careful men know when the wind has changed. The note got paid. The ranch held. What Jonah Cardwell did, on a still cold morning in November, with the first hard frost silvering the corral rails, was walk out to where Della stood, watching the breath steam off the horses, and hand her a folded paper. She took it the way she took everything, careful, suspicious of easy gifts. She unfolded it. It was drawn up in the spidery hand of the lawyer over in 3 Pines, and it named her co-owner of the Cardwell Ranch, in full, equal partner in the land, and the stock, and the breeding operation she had built, with her name beside his on every line, and her authority equal to his on every decision. It was not a wage, it was not a settlement, it was the thing itself. She read it twice. He watched her read it twice. Then, she folded it back along its creases and looked at him, and for the first time since he had ridden up that road in August with his hands raised, he could not read her face at all. Why, she said. It was not quite a question. Be plain with me, Jonah. I'm too old and too tired for the other kind. All right, he said. Plain. He took off his hat, which he had not planned to do, and stood there, turning it in his hands like a boy. I came home expecting nothing and found everything still standing. I've watched you for 3 months, hold this whole place in your head and never drop a thread of it. I've watched you doctor a man's husband for nothing, and bring in a widow's hay for nothing, and stand up in a room full of men who'd written you off and back them all down with a tin box full of receipts. He stopped, started again. The partnership papers are because it's yours, Della. Half of it was always yours, and I won't have it any other way. That part's just the law catching up to the truth. And the other part, she said. The other part, he said, is that I'd like to ask you something, and I didn't want to ask it while the law still owed you. I didn't want you to wonder, even for a second, whether a man was offering you his name because he wanted the ranch tied up neat, or whether he was offering it because he can't stop thinking about the sound you made the morning that fool foal sat down in the trough. And because there isn't a thing on this earth I want more than to stand on that porch every morning of my life with you next to me. He turned the hat one more time. So now the papers are signed and the land is yours free and clear, no matter what you say next. And what I want to ask you, with nothing writing on it but the asking Della Pruitt, will you marry me? The frost lay white on the rails. The horses moved easy in the pasture below. 2 Medicine Creek ran somewhere out of sight, low and cold and certain. Della Pruitt, who had been turned away from every door in the valley, who had slept in a hayloft and buried the only man who'd ever taken a chance on her, and held a whole ranch together through a drought and a banker, and a man who would have ground her into the dirt without a second thought. Della Pruitt looked at the man standing bareheaded in the cold with his whole heart in his plain words, and found that her steady hands were not steady, and that her hard, plain face was doing something it had not done in years. Yes, she said, on one condition. Name it. My name stays on the deed, first, above yours. Jonah Cardwell laughed, and it came up out of him from somewhere deep and broke across his face like the sun coming over the ridge. First and above, he said. I'll have the lawyer redo it tomorrow. Della, yes. Of course. Yes. They were married 3 weeks later, in the white frame church at Coldwater Forks, on the first Saturday of December, with snow coming down soft and steady outside the windows and the stove glowing in the corner. Della wore a dress of deep blue wool that Greta Dietrich and Ruth Calloway had sewn for her between them, sitting up nights over it, and she carried no flowers because there were none to be had in December. But Esther Boone's 2 boys had cut sprigs of cedar and juniper and tied them with ribbon, and she carried that instead, and the smell of it filled the church. The pews were full. Every family that had stood up in that long room above the mercantile was there, and a good many who had not but wished now that they had. Otto Dietrich gave her away, because there was no one else to do it, and he wept openly all the way up the short aisle, and was not ashamed. The widow Boone played the little wheezing organ. Jonah stood at the front in his father's good coat, taken in at the shoulders to fit him, and watched her come toward him through the cedar smell and the lamplight and the soft falling snow beyond the glass, and his hands, too, were not steady. There was one empty seat near the back, where a powerful man had once expected to sit at the head of every table in the valley, and nobody looked at it, and nobody missed him. They said the vows plain, the both of them, the way they said everything to each other, no flourishes and no pretending. And when the pastor pronounced them man and wife, the church rang with it. The whole valley packed into that small, warm room stamping and calling out, and somebody had a fiddle, and somebody else had brought a cake against all reason in December, and they pushed the pews back, and there was dancing while the snow came down. Late, when most of it had wound down, Jonah found Della standing alone by the window with a cup of cider, watching the snow fill in the wagon tracks in the road. Tired? He asked. No, she said, and he could hear the surprise in it, that she could be honest about such a thing. I keep waiting to be. She turned from the window and looked at him, this man who had ridden home expecting a padlock and a grave, and had found her instead, and had had the sense to see what she was. I spent my whole life, she said slowly, being the thing nobody wanted around, the thing you hired because you were too tired to say no. And tonight, every soul in this valley is standing in a warm room because of me. And the man I'm married to keeps looking at me like I hung the moon. She shook her head once. I don't believe it yet. I might not believe it for a while. Jonah set his hand over hers where it held the cup, flat and warm, the way she would lay a hand on a fence post to test whether it would hold. Believe it slow then, he said. We've got every morning from here on out. I'll tell you again on every one of them, until you do. Outside, the snow kept falling soft over Coldwater Forks, over the church and the mercantile and the long road north, over the empty buggy tracks of a man who had left and would not be back, and out across the valley to where the Cardwell Ranch, the Pruitt Cardwell Ranch now, her name first and above, just as she'd said, stood squared and sound and full of fat horses, built back from nothing, board by board and post by post, by a woman the whole world had told to keep moving, and who had finally, at long last, stayed. Della was turned away from every door in that valley, yet she kept showing up, doing the work in front of her with steady hands and an honest ledger. That's the quiet thing worth remembering. The people who underestimate you don't get the last word. Your patience does, your kindness does, the truth you build day by day does. Keep going. The right door opens for those who never stopped knocking. A small note for you. This story was created and fictionalized by AI purely to bring you a little entertainment, while also passing along a warm and positive lesson for everyday life.